Hi, Matt from footballboots.co.uk, and today's video will showcase the differences between Nike's Mercurial Superfly uppers. We have the standard Superfly, CR7 Signature Edition, and the leather Tech Craft. We've got the Lightning Storm, CR7 Savage Beauty, and the Canvas Vault colorway. So what are the differences? Let's find out in this video. Starting off with arguably the most noticeable is the visual display. So the standard Superfly, it has a shiny shimmering upper to it. As we can see, the pink hits the light and it just displays that shimmering tone. Really nice, really luxury. Little top drawer in my opinion. However, the CR7 edition, the Savage Beauty, the black, orange, blue, yellow tones in there, it stays quite matte. So as I bring these boots in together, as it hits the light, we can see the Lightning Storm one just picks up the light a little bit more and just shimmers in the light, just slightly so more than the CR7 edition. And then of course, the Tech Craft has that leather layer. So it's a matte leather, canvas colour, runs across the toe box and side panels. And that's the difference there. So there's no shimmer, it's got a matte tone to that leather. In terms of the feel, both in hand and on feet, now the synthetic and CR7 editions are exactly the same. They've got that ultra thin upper and it's soft. So some synthetic boots are quite stiff. However, the Superfly is very soft. Okay, really lovely synthetic upper there. And then in comes the Tech Craft edition, and it's thin. So it's not as thin as the synthetic standard editions. However, it's very, very soft. So not as thin, but in terms of softness, it's a next level. It's top drawer. As I'm pressing in, it almost holds its shape in there. Top quality. It's something that I'm a massive fan of. I tested these a few weeks ago and I thought they were top drawer, and I even preferred them over the standard versions. In terms of performance, the standard version and the CR7 edition both have that Nike skin upper that runs on top of the fly knit. Entire boot here runs across the toe box, side panels and heel cut. Again on the CR7 edition, runs across the entire boot. It's that Nike skin upper and it's quite grippy in hand. So as I'm running my thumb over here, I can just feel that it's got a little bit more grip. So as I'm touching, dribbling and striking the ball, that's going to have some performance enhancing qualities on there. The Tech Craft has that natural leather. So that's going to provide you with the most traditional feel when playing in the boots, and it's something that I noticed when playing. I wore the CR7, I wore the Savage Beauty ones just before I wore the Tech Craft, and there was a difference in terms of texture, feel and feedback. Feedback's the word. As I was striking and touching the ball, it just gave me a slightly nicer feedback. Something when I was striking the ball cleanly, I could tell that it was going to be a really nice strike or touch in the leather, just a little bit more so than the CR7 edition and also the standard. So moving away from the performance aspect slightly and talking about the structure, we can see that the standard edition and also the CR7 edition, the synthetic upper just retains its shape and structure. They've both been played in and they still have their same shape, really nice. However, the leather Tech Craft, after only a few uses for a test, a play test and review, we can see that the shape and structure does go slightly. So if I push it in, it does kind of hold that shape that we've used there. However, on the synthetic versions, it does retain its shape and structure just a little bit more, whereas the Tech Craft, it does collapse slightly. And even when my foot was in the boot, laced up, the medial instep here, the instep would just fold over. So that's maybe something that I wasn't a great fan of. However, that is due to the really soft upper. Now all the Superflies here feature Nike's Flywire that features on each of the side panel, the medial and lateral side panels. However, a difference is on the synthetic versions it's quite prominent. Okay, so we can feel and see in hand that it does just come up slightly more. It's slightly more prominent than on the leather. Because the leather layer is slightly thicker than the synthetic, that Nike skin, it's just not as prominent. So as I bring it in closer to the camera here, we can see that it's slightly shallower on top of the upper. So it's not going to be as noticeable on the outside of the boot, but inside it's still going to give you that same lockdown and same responsive fit that the Superfly is renowned for. So in terms of how the upper is actually applied onto the boot, the standard version and also the CR7, it's been pressed onto the fly knit. So we can see that it's got no stitching running across the entire Nike skin. That's just pressed on top of the fly knit upper. Really seamless, lovely in my opinion. However, the leather Tech Craft, we can see that it's actually been stitched on top of that fly knit. So the fly knit runs underneath the boot, and then the leather layer has been stitched across the lacing system here. So that's the difference The Tech Craft is stitched on top of the fly knit. However, the standard version and the CR7 editions has been pressed on top of that fly knit. Nike's ACC technology, the all conditions control, as you'd expect, is on the standard version, ACC logo there. Also on the CR7 edition to ACC, and also it features on the leather Tech Craft. Okay, so although it's a natural material, that really soft K leather upper, it does feature on that too. And the ACC technology is just there to ensure that touch and control of the ball is maintained in all conditions. So if you were worried that the Tech Craft boot didn't have the ACC technology and you wanted a pair, they do in fact have the ACC technology. So it's a really good combination of traditional materials and modernistic technology. So that brings us to the end of our Nike Mercurial Superfly uppers comparison. I hope it's helped you with any queries or questions that you had about the boots. There are some visual differences between the standard edition and the CR7, and of course is the visual differences between the leather. That's probably the biggest difference, the visual, and also it does have that leather upper on top of the fly knit. If you have any more questions or queries or any comments, please put a little comment in the description bar below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks guys, cheers.